Hello and welcome to Building Tomorrow's Insurer, the podcast where we explore the future of insurance through the lens of innovation, technology, and bold thinking. And I'm your host, Nigel Fellowes-Freeman. And today we are diving into, hopefully, the transformation of insurance, monolithic systems to modular intelligent experiences. And we are joined by none other than Aurora Voss. She is the co-founder and CEO of Zemble. And I'm going to give this a go, but let me know, Aurora, if this is not the right pitch for you. Aurora is an Insurtech that is redefining how insurers digitize workflows, automate compliance, and then use data to build stronger relationships, not just assess the risk. And one of the most things I'm most looking forward to this conversation is Aurora's journey. She has, I think like every founder, her journey has not been conventional, from hospo to venture capital, and now launching a business in the insurance world. I cannot wait to dive in and learn a little bit about your story, Aurora. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. You did the pitch really well. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. I'd love to, before we get into the nuts and bolts, I'd love to, I just touched on it then just a little bit, which is, if we just look back at a few years, you were in kind of venture capital, you were at KPMG, looking at businesses from the outside in, and then you made a decision to jump in, and insurance was the place for you to jump into. And so, do you mind starting there? Like, what did you learn when you were on the venture side, on the capital side, and then what made you make the jump and jump into insurance?
Yeah. So I actually think that my interest and curiosity to get into an insurance-related business probably came quite a bit before my stint in venture capital. Mm-hmm. I suppose starting my career, I zigzagged quite a bit, but I suppose the common theme of my career has been I've had some very interesting work experiences with highly regulated industries and businesses. Not in insurance, but started my career in healthcare. So I worked for quite a bit for the NHS when I lived in Europe. My sort of entrance into startups or scale-ups was in an edtech business that was trying to go in sort of on the vocational education side and had a lot of regulatory pressure. And I think that I've done weird and wonderful things in between. But I think that definitely informed my sort of raw curiosity to how, like, this is a nightmare. Like, highly regulated businesses just operate under such pressure from all ends. There's the actual business and the work you're trying to do. There's the regulatory stuff that comes on top. And that always fascinated me, that tension, that pull. At KPMG, I was really lucky. I had a year at KPMG. It was so much fun. I was in the high growth ventures team, and I had the privilege of sort of seeing and doing all the really great fun things when you've got this kind of powerhouse behind you. And KPMG is, I'm biased, but I think it's a very interesting business from a data perspective. They do some wonderful things in the data analytics space. And I got to see, under an enterprise of high growth ventures, I was able to see a lot of great businesses, everything from ag tech, sports tech, and Insurtech. And my last job, which, as you say, in venture capital, was running H2 Ventures. And that was a very interesting, I think that also informed my sort of jump into the Insurtech space, because H2 Ventures, I would say, one of the most successful and interesting early stage investors in the Australian landscape, had a very, very strong portfolio in fintech. And, they were critical of bringing up some really interesting Aussie fintechs and really proving out the model that Australia is a great place to start a business and a great place to test something in the financial services landscape. So I was very lucky to be exposed to lots of early stage and scale up fintechs. And I one of the first businesses that I came into contact with that we invested in at H2 Ventures was Zemble, or as we were previously known, Claimspace. I fell in love with the two original co-founders, Alfonso and Spencer. Fell in love with our original sort of goal, which was to make disability claims more transparent. It was off the back of the Royal Commission in Insurance, and I also personally, through family members and others, experienced a number of funky claims experiences. So I think there were a whole lot of things that made me want to jump in. I mean, I always say that the main thing was the co-founders, right? Spencer has since left the business, but I'm still in business with Alfonso, and I've always say I'm really lucky to have found the greatest co-founder ever. So that's definitely an undercurrent. But then, yeah, that's why we're all in this industry. There's just so much to do. It's so deeply interesting when you actually go in, to the outside world. Insurance looks like one thing, and you get in here and you're like, this is why people spend their careers in this industry, because there's so much to do and so much to see and so much interesting data.
So much delay. All of you're absolutely right. You kind of start to, what's the term? Peel back the onion, or whatever their kind of analogy is. Analogy, I can never say that word. Analogy. The analogy is, which is you kind of pull back the onion and, start to see all the different layers and how the value chain stacks up and how all the pieces fit together. And I think that from my little bit of knowledge around kind of what the place that you're playing today, that's really a focus on the processes that sit around that, right? And so can you maybe talk to that a little bit around how you're looking, what you understand about the insurance process, and then what the gap you're really kind of surgically attacking at the moment?
Yeah, I suppose I can start with, when I first started in Zemble, I guess back then I had a lot of, we call it imposter syndrome, to be honest. But, coming into an industry like insurance, the first few years with Zemble, I had a lot of thoughts, like, as a founder, am I meant to be here? Do I know enough? Like, am I allowed to, and I think I'm now in a space sort of 5 or 6 years later, having worked with all different kinds of customers. So, we're currently bringing a new product to market, which is our second ever product. But the first product that we've had in there for 5 or 6 years, Zemble Case, has, given me the privilege of working with primarily a lot of different kinds of claims teams. And that's sort of, as I alluded to, that's where we started. And now Zemble Case is being used in a few different countries by all different kinds of claims and, in some cases, compliance teams to manage really complex multi-stakeholder workflows. And typically our customers will take them off of Excel and email into a sort of unified platform. In other cases, we're working with very large insurers as a sort of core claims management system extender. But what I think has informed, well, I'll get to the new product soon, but I think I've really seen through the last 5 or 6 years of working with those kinds of insurance teams is the penny dropped. When we went in, it was all about workflow. That was the big thing. Let's get your claims onto a workflow. Let's get it out of this Excel and this into something that is structured and different stakeholders can follow. But what the penny really dropped a couple of years ago, I suppose, when I realized my co-founder and I realized it's just about data. Like, that was the big thing. This is all data. The process is data. The people are data. Everything is data. And that really came from, in particular, the life insurance claims teams that we were working with. This is a claims manager who's working with a claim that has 250 data points that person has to be on top of and understand, and rules depend on them and where the claim goes. And so much of that particular product that we were selling, as the founder selling it I was so focused on everything around it. I was so focused on the workflow and the different modules and the stakeholder portals, the digital portals, when it came down to brass tacks, it was, how do we get the data in and what can we do with the data when we have it? Are we handling it safely? So that was, I suppose, as a sort of broader experience over the last few years, realizing that the future of insurance is all about data, not necessarily in the way that you think. That led to the new product, which we're called Zemble Data Flow, funnily enough. And that new product, where it's come from, is a realization that all of these insurance businesses of all stripes, all sizes, they know the power in data, but the tools to manage that data in a well-governed, compliant way are severely lacking.
Do you, Aurora, just to jump in there, do you think they do? Do you think they do know? Obviously, that I think you and I both agree that insurance is a data business, fundamentally a data business. There's a bunch of inputs to a bunch of data, and then we make decisions and underwriting rules all based on that knowledge. And so, Do you think that insurers today have the data teams established that they should have, considering how fundamental this oil is to an insurance business?
So, no, I don't. I don't think so.
Yeah.
But I also think that, I think of building the insurer of tomorrow. I think that so many things are changing. And when I think about the future, there's a few kind of rules that we think about a lot at Zemble. And one of them is, we think a lot about our customers, the data that they manage. And a few trends that I see, when I say trends, I'm like things that I see in meetings with these customers.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm seeing the actual person that buys technology is changing within insurers.
Right.
So and I see this, if you'll permit me to sort of where I think it comes from, generally in technology, like we had on-prem and then on-prem to cloud, and that was the big woohoo. And then, everything became a workflow, and that's so exciting. But I think that if you look outside of insurance technology and generally technology related to highly regulated enterprises, like I just think the big wow was Zapier, right? I think that Zapier was for me personally, like it was the most amazing piece of technology I'd ever used. That being able to take, not just power, but like put power into the hands of operators, right? Non-technical people, being able to actually orchestrate across different tools to really, really change and transform processes. I feel like in outside worlds, in the non-insurance world, that's become a norm, right? Like that's where like there's so many tools like Zapier, a lot of other tools have started to think in that orchestrated kind of way. And I feel like in insurance, I see the future as that. And that means that the people buying insurance technology in the future, I think that they're going to be operators. But what that means is that when we talk about data teams, we need to actually rethink data teams in insurance, because typically data teams are outside of the business units. They're sort of like detached from the everyday needs of the business. And it sort of ends up in this, it all comes down to reporting, right? Data teams are there just to report. And who are we reporting to? Reporting to executives, reporting to the board, reporting to regulators. Whereas at Zemble, we really see the future as there's a new buyer. That buyer is an operator, and therefore they're going to have to think about data teams differently. So, but again, it's all sort of connected, because if you're going to rethink insurance data teams, then you need to totally rethink the tools that are given to operators, to kind of get that done.
And when you rethink, perfect segue, when you rethink those tools, Aurora, talk to me. New products. I feel like this is the perfect segue for the product. Talk to me. What's the new product? Give us I want to hear about it.
Yeah, so what we believe at Zemble is that these highly regulated businesses, they need tools that don't think about compliance or data governance as an afterthought. They're embedded. So the rules are embedded, and that's a theme that I'm so excited about in insurance and financial services generally. So our new product, Zemble Data Flow, at its core, it is a data product. So you can use it to compliantly collect data in a governed way. So using the tool, you can create digital data requests that are governance enforced at the org level, and you can then put those data requests onto a workflow to achieve a number of things, whether it's review, approve, attest, send it to this person, depending on what kind of data comes in. And the specific wedge that we're going after initially is we're really focused on the collection of risk and compliance data, because insurance teams and business units, every single unit, their business is to collect data, whether it's underwriting data, claims data, et cetera, policy data. But we're really focused on how can we help insurance organizations of all sizes, mostly in the beginning, smaller ones. How can we help them to streamline how they collect and then make decisions on risk and compliance data? That might look like, how do we collect risk and compliance data from vendors, from internal executives, board members? Because from a regulatory standpoint, there's lots and lots of change going on, and lots of processes like financial accountability regime, DDO processes, vendor risk and compliance information has to be collected. And so we're really starting at that pointy wedge, because it's a messy mill right now. Every single insurance business has a GRC platform, but those core risk and compliance platforms tend to think of data in a kind of static way and tend to be reactive rather than proactive. And as you and me know, everything still lives in Excel.
Sure does. And when you think about compliance and governance, I suppose it's often when we see it, when we are working with those teams, even internally, the teams you work with, whenever the compliance and governance teams get mentioned, like, oh, keep those out of the meeting, keep those guys away. As soon as those guys come in, we can't do as much as we want to do, right? And so, and we don't think that, but often we hear it from internally, like internal business teams within carriers, right? And so often seen as these blockers to innovation, but obviously you've got a very different view of this. And so, like, how do you think about this kind of, I suppose, intelligence being able to be like an enabler of this innovation versus a friction point?
The reason that I've been in a million of those meetings exactly as I say, and I did because risk and compliance, generally speaking, it's something that everyone is aware of, everyone thinks about, but from a tooling perspective, it's an afterthought. It's something that you do once you get the data in and it's already in your organization, and then we have to implement it. So fundamentally, I think that insurance tooling and technology needs to rethink data governance, compliance, and risk, and needs to actually embed those kinds of rules into the actual technology itself. So rather than having to say slap a rules engine on top of something that's messy or already in, rather really think about, and that's why we are so obsessed with how do insurers collect data. That's where we start. How do they collect data? Can the tools that we give them make sure that as they collect the data, it's governed, it's categorized, it is masked and redacted, it's, retention rules are in place. I fundamentally think that the future of insurance technology tools must have the rules embedded. I always say that to the team, embed the rules. And the truth is that most insurance technology, you build for the process and then you get like SOC 2 or ISO, and that's sort of a way to show compliance and governance, which is very, very important. We are too, but I think that that's really how I think about it. And I think about this a lot, like from a co-pilot standpoint, right? Because we're in the middle of this AI boom, and a lot of compliance, insurance, regulatory related tools is starting to think in terms of AI co-pilots, and that's really like a Gen AI chatbot that might surface policies or answer questions. But, it's not that that's not useful. It's useful, but it's not the revolution, right? Like, it's a UI layer intelligence, but it doesn't change the systems underneath it. And I think the real shift in insurance infrastructure is where the technology itself becomes so responsive and policy aware, and it functions as the co-pilot behind the scenes. There's a place for both, but I really like that's what we think about. Like, where I think that's where governance and compliance is headed in insurance. It's embedded intelligence, not just a kind of conversational thing that pulls up something here and there. Really, like I always said in T, embed the rules in every part of our product and every single thing. Embed the rules. That's so important. Fundamentally, I think that insurance, when I talk about, I tell people, now having lots of conversations with insurance businesses saying, hey, we'll help you in the first instance to collect data in a compliant, governed way. And funnily enough, usually those conversations like, oh my gosh, great, because I've got all this data that I want to collect. And we always say we're actually anti-data collection at Zemble, right? Because I think that is, historically data in insurance has been an actuarial commodity, right? And it's, actuaries have to price the risk and underwriters have to assess exposure and, but it's like this massive funnel. So the sort of historical way to think about data in insurance is collect everything that you can at point of entry, like at the first relationship, and then at claim time, collect everything that you can to then line those two things up and see, where the holes are, And what's happened is, that's an understandable model historically, But because the tooling has not had data governance in it from the start, what we're now seeing is insurers, like they're data powerhouses, but data's only powerful if you have it in order. It's only powerful, and AI is only really useful, as an example, if it is structured and if it's accessible. And that's why I think now we're seeing this first wave of AI in insurance. Most of the tools, that's how I would venture a guess, that most of the AI spend from insurers is going towards AI tools that are just trying to help them make sense of this unstructured data mess that they have. And so I'm this big fan of say to my customers, I'm like, collect what matters and govern it as it goes in. I think that in general, insurance needs to rethink that.
Yeah, interesting. And when you think about the kind of the new data regulations of like customer ownership of data, and obviously kind of our open banking regime, which could move over time, whether that comes in the next 12 months or 5 years, we will see when that actually kind of arrives onto the insurer's doorstep. But obviously what you saw within the banking world is them needing to be able to make the data they have on their customers available for those customers who own the data to share it with whoever they want to. When I think about that this is a bit off script, so I apologize, I'm just throwing this at you from a complete left field here. From a carrier perspective, them being able to understand where the data is and then expose it in a format that's usable. Like, I just think, I don't even know where they're going to start. The number of data warehouses that are 15, 16, 17 different spots in a business. Have you got any view on that? Have you got any view on, like, if you were still at KPMG and you were advising some carriers on like how they're going to start approaching this problem? Have you got any views? I don't know. So I'm interested.
Yeah, I'll try. I have views. I'll try and make sense of them. I think that on this specific topic, I think it's really important to break down, because insurance is a big market and there's lots of different sized players. And I think that when it comes to this specific problem of data and making sense of it, I think the approaches have to be completely different, right? Like if you're a large insurer that's sitting on between 50 and 100 years of data, that data is most likely in silos within specific business teams, and there's most likely like tremendous amount of double up in data across the different teams. So, they have a specific problem on their hands that they have to deal with in a way that's very, very, for them, it's about, like, I would say it's about breaking the monolith. I always talk about that. They've got to find a way to break the monolith. They have to find a way for every single team to become a data team. And what I find, just as a little segue, what I find so interesting is, there's this point of view out there, go to conferences and talk in the industry, but there's the big guys and the little guys. That's always so binary. It's like there's this large insurers and, are they ever going to be able to turn it around? And then there's the small guys who can move really nimbly. But I think what that debate misses, or that sort of black and white misses, is that the small guys, they're trying to become big guys, right? Like everyone, you go to an NGA and you go and start with one product, they didn't start with one product. Like they want to scale and they want to get as big as, the big guys if possible. And so but there's sort of like a race. I find that data issue like a race to the middle. The big guys are going to have to break up the monolith. They're going to have to think in like a federated, we talk about a federated innovation model. But which I really like that as a kind of framework, this idea of federated innovation model. But for large and small to mid-sized insurers, they have to use it and apply it in a completely different way. But I think that's a very important thing to remember. The small guys want to be big guys, and for them, when it comes to data and compliance and governance, for them they use it as it's a different tool, right? It's in order to scale, it's in order to prove credibility, it's in order to make sure the rails don't fall off as they go. But I mean, the larger insurers, if I was KPMG and I was advising, I mean, it's very difficult. There's a way, obviously, and there has to be a way. But if I was the big insurers, I would be investing in as many kind of, I'm not going to say sub-brands, but I would be trying to really get very good at spinning up new brands and MGAs, because it's very hard. I think it's very hard for them to learn how to do this veteran innovation model and how to really change if they're not learning in a practical way. And it's very hard to learn on a monolith. It's very, very hard to go faster on a monolith. But if you can do it in a controlled way, and there's lots of examples of this in the US and in the UK of larger insurers that have either supported or bought or co-created these smaller brands that can be digital first. I think you have to see it to believe it. And so I don't know if I've answered you.
Yeah, that's super interesting. No, you have. And I think we're just going to continue that thread of data, getting to that thread of the traditional way of viewing data is, from an insurer's perspective, is to assess risk. I've seen I think I read it somewhere that you kind of suggested that data is actually a relationship enabler versus a pure way to assess risk. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots and lots and lots of different ways that I think about this. I mean, I think first and foremost, I think about it as like claims is the most obvious place for that. But in Zemble days, I think so much about claims people and about this rule that we have, which is automate the repetitive and elevate the human, right?
I like that. Talk to me more on that. That sounds good.
It sounds good. Yeah, I think it's good too. I mean, it's not anything new, right? It's just this idea that when you're looking at an insurance process, whether it's claims or underwriting or, sales process, we must think about technology. And I'm not just talking about AI. I think there's a lot of focus on, use AI to automate everything that makes sense. And then, people's jobs will get better. It's quite, I think for most people, it can be quite an abstract kind of thing to think about. But we talk about automating the routine and elevating the human. So what it means is, if you look at, for example, a claims organization, and I'm talking about big or small, in life or general, whatever it is, at the moment, like there are triaging tools and there are rules engines that sort of get this particular kind of claim to here, or to this person. But ultimately, it's still based on the assumption that everything has to be reviewed. Every process must be reviewed. Every process must go through these steps, NUCD. And sometimes there are like dozens and dozens of steps. And I think that that's just traditionally the way that most insurance business units think about their processes. It must go through this. It must be reviewed. And again, I think it comes from tools that like governance and risk and compliance in their DNA. I think a lot of it comes from that. But okay, back to the claims organization. Let's just say at the moment, we've got 100 people, and that might be split into different kinds of claims managers or admin. There are 100 people, and they're having to go through, because of the tools, they're having to go through every step. And a lot of people in claims might talk about like auto approve or straight through processing. But the reason I think that hasn't become a reality yet is because the tools themselves really don't allow for it, right? They don't have enough governance. They don't have enough oversight. There's no like automated auditing function. But where I see it in terms of automating the routine and elevating the human is, if you could find a way, I think the way is through governance tools. If you could find a way to say automate or really be very clear on the rules for 80% of those cases. So based on the input at claim time, 80% of those cases can be streamlined. Whether it's streamlined to approval, most likely, or if it's a decline, I think that needs to become a reality, so that, say, 10 or 20% go straight to the human. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't think about it too much. The best people to make judgment calls are people and, very experienced claims managers. But I think the debate stops there because everyone freaks out about what happens to all these people, right? Like what happens to the 80 other claims managers. And right now we're in a place where it's a bit scary. So people just, again, go binary and they think, well, they're either, hacked and they go, oh, we're going to get fired. But then the insurers, rightly, are like, no, we need to reimagine their roles. For me, what it looks like is, of those 100 people, there might be about 20 who become the judgment callers, right? They become the ones who the 15 or 20% of cases go to. And no one better to make that call. And then it's complex cases where there's multiple inputs, things are ambiguous, they're not clear. But then the rest of the workforce becomes the process enhancers. They become the ones who own the tools. They become the ones who refine the processes. And then the other third, or whatever it is, they become the auditors, right? Because you cannot straight through 80% of anything if there's not a really well-oiled auditing mechanism. And I don't just mean like someone going in and randomly picking things out. I mean, like the tools have to think about auditing from the start. So again, hope I've answered that in a semi-coherent way. But yeah, when we talk about automating the routine and elevating the human, that from a technology perspective is how we're thinking about it. What is it as a process?
Yeah, I absolutely love the thinking of this unbundling of the team. In terms of we think of a team in a certain way, but actually unbundle the team and deploy them across a process in a different way. Super interesting concept. You mentioned you had these five, was it the five trends? No, these five rules. I mean, these five rules. Can you tell us what they are? Do you know what these five rules are?
It's so corny. I call it
I love it. Zemble Manifesto. Love it. Absolutely love it. Let's hear it.
So break the monolith, right? So traditional views are that these systems mean big control. That's true, I think, all across insurance. That's the tightly held belief. But, our view is sort of fewer moving parts, that those moving parts must be modular by design and workflows must be orchestrated, right? So the idea is to... And now I've seen this whole idea of breaking the monolith, it's typically come from outside of large insurers. If I was to speak anecdotally, it's been like, the incumbent's too big and the insurance functions in terms of technology is too big and they have to change. Whereas I think what I've seen change is that whole idea of breaking the monolith. I think it's now the call is coming from inside the house. It's like I think the large insurers are really starting to think about this. And I'm not just talking about, being legacy incumbent bought platforms, because it can be built or bought, but I really am seeing like claims teams, underwriting teams, I'm starting to see them really think about, can we break this down? Can we put it into modular parts that are more flexible and allow us to have more ownership of the process? And it's always like, Insurtech love to talk about how the big incumbents, take 6 months to change and annual release and stuff. And yeah, it's true. But in a much more practical sense, I think what insurers of all sizes are looking for is want more ownership over the technology. And often that translates to, we need to build it ourselves. And I do think that particularly smaller, more digital insurers are starting to build their own core functions. But I think that in general, this idea of breaking the monolith, it works for technology, but it also works for the kind of centralized model of insurance in order to enable compliance and governance. The second one, is what I spoke about before, which is embed the rules. I mean, you have to embed it. And a lot of times it's meant, that means that governance is a system. It's not a separate step. That's what I'm really trying to get at, And if you embed the rules from a governance and compliance standpoint, then you sort of get rid of the need for checklists and memory tests, and the tools themselves become the logic, which is the number one step to elevating the human and automating the routine, which is that next step. So that's another part of our manifesto. So automate 80% or 90% of workflows. And that doesn't mean, again, I just feel the need to, for all the insurers listening out there, it doesn't mean automate without oversight, right? It means follow rules, whether it's rules in terms of all level governance and compliance, as well as business specific requirements. But automate it. And when I say automate, put it on a workflow, follow the rules. The rules are embedded in the tools. And that's how you get to the place where you can elevate the 20% of cases that require real thought and judgment. Number 4, back to what I mentioned before, collect only what matters. This is my war cry, collect only what matters. Like in a claims, like if you think about, for example, switching to a life insurance focus, that's where we came up. Like if you think about an income protection, or even Australian life insurance are grappling with total and permanent disability claims at the moment. It's a big pointless topic. But if you think about that kind of claim, of course there's ambiguity and there's nuance and there's complexity in some of the cases, but in the majority of cases, I don't see the need to collect so much information at point of claim, right? Whether it's from the financial advisor, whether it's from, beneficiary or the claimant. Because when you actually get to the heart of it and you talk to the claims team about what is it that gets to approval or decline, or I'm not sure, it's actually it's a few data points, right? It's like, has the illness been proven by at least 2 doctors? And if I can't get 2 doctors, is it a medical examiner? Is it, is there a likelihood of returning to work? If not, I don't want to oversimplify the podcast, but I really, in my depths of my soul, really believe in this idea of collecting less, which is it's so opposite from what insurance has always believed. And it doesn't mean stop collecting data or data isn't important. There are some very interesting, tools that allow publicly available data to come in and inform, et cetera. That doesn't change. But from my relationship with a customer, there's so much that insurers ask. They ask.
It's just like safety blanket, right? Like it's this warm safety blanket of data that, like, I feel because I've got it around me. I then when I got to make a decision, I'm not going to be like, oh, I should have asked this or I should have done that.
Yeah. And then the 5th one is to empower the operator. And I believe that anyone building building technology for insurance should be thinking that way. Whoever your operator is, whoever your person who lives and breathes your tools, that's who you need to be building for. I love it.
I've got a 6th one for you. It's just come to me. I think you should think about. But I think it encompasses a couple of yours actually. And compliance or governance by design. I kind of like that thought of thinking that it's you're designing everything with compliance in mind. Everything governance is by design. The design of the workflow, design of the system, design of the tooling, design of all of the pieces sit around it. It's governance by design. Anyway, one for you to think about. You don't have to add it in. And if you do, I'll have a couple percentage points. Thanks. That'd be great. We could talk all day. But there's so many founders that listen to this, and you and I both know that the founding journey is hard, and it's always good to hear from people who are in the trenches and doing it. And so have you got any tips if you were starting again, if you were trying to advise an early founder what to do, some things not to do? Have you got any advice you would say to your former self or a new startup founder who's looking to come maybe in specifically insurance or just starting out?
Yeah, I've learnt the hard way in a lot of things. I always say to other founders, I worked in venture capital, and I remember telling those early stage businesses, oh, you should do this and you should do this and don't do that. And then I went and made all those same mistakes. So I seem to be someone who can only learn the hard way and can only learn by doing. I think specifically if I'm talking to a group of founders who want to solve for industries like insurance, the only real bit of wisdom I can give is you better love this industry. Like, you better love it. You better love everything that it is. It's like marrying someone. You take them for who they are, how they are, meet them where they are. I think that's so important because, I'm not a total newbie. Like, I've been at this for 5 years, and there's been lots of ups and downs, but what hasn't changed is me and my co-founder have this thirst. We have this sort of curious need to solve for this and the people in the industry. And I think that if you're if you're a founder who maybe has a little bit less patience or doesn't, really appreciate all everything about insurance, the needs, the complexity, and fundamentally the place that it has in our economy. I mean, I don't know how you could possibly succeed if you don't have all of those things. So that's my only kind of pill of wisdom, and to stay as close to customers as you can. There's nothing, you can't solve for an industry like this if you're not right there with the customers all the time, constant feedback loops, which is actually incredibly difficult. For example, if you're selling enterprise software to mid or large size insurers, that feedback loop is that's probably a lesson for insurance as well. Stay very, very, very close to your tech vendors. Yeah.
It's great advice. And I think you're absolutely right. In enterprise, speaking to the right folks who can give you a short feedback loop is a challenge, but definitely one really important if you want to have an initiative cycle. And I just want to ask one final question, if you'd let me. Obviously, the pod is all around building tomorrow's insurer. I'd love you to pull out your crystal ball to wrap us up. If you're going to predict what the biggest transformation for insurance is going to be over the next 5 years, what do you think it's going to be?
So, number one, I think that governance and compliance by design, that's where tools are headed. But if I was to go one more, I get asked this question, and sometimes I feel like, I need to be able to say what the next big insurance product is going to be. I have no idea. But what I do know is what I think is coming is I think that Zapier type tools are coming for insurance. I think that's crystal ball, that's the future of insurance. It's not just siloed business unit specific tools. It's actually giving insurers of all kinds the ability to orchestrate those tools, which is, I think that's the future. I'm so excited about that future. And that's why we're building what we're building at Zemble. It's, which we're solving for a layer of data collection and management that typically sits in email and Excel. And we don't know how you can possibly get to that new topic orchestrative situation if that has not become workflowed, rules embedded, governance embedded, different teams collaborating on workflows across different parts of the business. I think that's the future.
I could not agree with you anymore. We're slightly different orchestration is slap bang in how we think about the world too. So I absolutely love it. And hopefully you and me can have a chat in 5 years' time, and we can look back and we go, you know what? Orchestration is super important. And things have come on a long, long way. Aurora, thank you so much for the conversation today. It's been really, really insightful. I'm sure a bunch of folks at home are now going to be looking at their workflows. And so thank you so much for your time today. It's been a really, really enjoyable conversation.
Same here. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the conversation today. I know I did, and I know I'll be watching it back very, very soon. If you want to see both Aurora and my faces, you can jump on YouTube and see the video version. The link will be in the description below. And as always, if you'd like to hear more from industry leaders who are pushing the boundaries of insurance, please do check out our other episodes of our podcast series, Building Tomorrow's Insurer, on LinkedIn, Spotify, and all of your normal podcast channels. Jump on LinkedIn, jump on Twitter, make sure you follow us. Thank you so much for listening.